Hi, I'm Leanne Ely. I'm a nutritionist, a New York Times best-selling author, and some people even say I'm a life coach. I started the Daily Dish Show to share my story, my truth, and my journey to vibrancy, and to inspire others to do the same. Because it's all about grit, perseverance, and finding a way despite the odds. It's about embracing the whole woman, not just the parts that are easy to love, and feeding her heart, mind, body, and soul. But I found that this isn't just my story, it's your story too. It's go time. This is the Daily Dish. All week long, we've been talking about letting go. Letting go, letting go, letting go. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about this idea, this process of what it takes to let go of shame. And I thought I would talk about this. And I'm talking about, usually I'll give you like, this is the definition of shame. These are what the experts say about shame. But today it's going to be a little bit of a story time because I'm going to pull some stuff out from my own life. And the only reason I'm doing this is not so that you can say, oh my gosh, or feel sorry for me or any of that stuff. I'm doing that because I want you to understand that shame is a thing that most of us have had to get through, or we're still living with and don't even probably realize. And I have a perspective on shame because I made an actual decision like, that's enough. And that's why I want to share that with you. Now, of course, I would recommend anything Brené Brown has written because her stuff about shame, watch her TED Talk, watch anything on YouTube that you can about from Brené Brown on shame. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And it really gives us a fabulous perspective of how it is that we need, why it is that we need to leave shame behind. But I'm going to say that letting go of shame is one of those things that takes a lot of doing. And that I recognize in my life, I recognize as I look back in my life that so much of my life was spent foundationally living my life on the fear factor of shame, because shame is real fear-filled as well. And shame had everything to do with everything that I did. And as I got older, my childhood was based on shame. I did not want anyone to know that my dad was not that guy who stayed home and did family stuff. He went off to bars and, did his thing. And then I didn't want anyone to know about how much my parents were drinking. I didn't want anyone to know about just how miserable it really was in our house and how much my parents fought. Lips were sealed. You don't want that out. We grew, maybe that was part of the era that I grew up in. I don't know. It just was this thing that you just didn't talk about these things. No one did. As far as I knew, I looked at the whole world. My childhood perspective was looking at the world, and everybody's families were great except mine. Mine was just a complete mess. And I know that's completely not true, but that's how I felt, and that's how I look back. And it was just shame and more shame, and then shame about that, and just keep it all quiet. And a lot of times I felt like, do you remember that little story about the kid? It was the little Dutch boy who was sticking his finger in the dam, trying to make it so that the dam wouldn't just explode and the water would come everywhere. I felt like that kid a lot, and just kind of trying to keep this veneer up all the time because I was so shame-filled with what was going on in my family and how they were. And I didn't want anyone to know. Into my adult years, same deal. Lots of shame there. And I've just tried to keep this veneer intact, and to keep, just keep everything smiling. Everything's great. And my middle years as well. And the weird thing is that my shame of what was going on in my life, which was based on my childhood, shifted to now we're going to concentrate on Leanne's weight. And my shame, I was filled with shame if I weighed a certain amount, and I was filled with shame I was filled with, a relief if the scale was where I wanted it to be that morning. It was really creepy. Carousel of, talk about a carousel of crazy. But I stayed really busy with that. I stayed super busy with my eyes on, if my jeans were too tight or whatever they needed to be. And I got more approval, which turned into be like this false sense of self-esteem when I was thin. And when the weight would come on, and it would because I was a food addict and I would go up and down constantly with my weight, I was shame-filled heavy, and I was not when I was thinner because people were telling me I was okay. People pleasing anyone, you know? And I do believe that there is a huge connection between people pleasing and shame because I believe that what we're doing when we people please, all the way and we get other people's approval, we're able to hide the shame just a little bit more. Does that make sense? At least that's how I felt about the whole thing. So I felt inadequate so much of the time. I felt stupid. I felt, honestly, I felt like I was not enough. Why couldn't I have had, and I do stupid stuff like, oh, I wish I'd had her long brown hair and her big brown eyes. I looked at myself and I hated all the freckles that I had. I hated that my coloring was what it was. It was just ridiculous, but it was something safe to focus on because it was right there. That meant I didn't have to go inward. Isn't that nutty? I was also bullied. I've shared my stories about being bullied and told on repeat how ugly I was and I got beat up and, all of this. And all of that stayed with me and trying to make sense out of it and trying to not be that, trying not to be the object of ridicule and the object of being bullied. But I felt that was the only power that I felt like I had in my life was shame, really. And I know this sounds it sounds kind of crazy, but honestly, the convolutedness of the whole thing and the focus of what was going on in myself at the time as a kid and as a young adult and even into my middle years was really focused on the wrong stuff. And shame begets shame, and guilt comes along with it. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, in just a minute. But it is just all interwoven with everything, and that that need to please everyone else and get everyone's approval and hope, hope that I'm good enough to be loved. Well, that spilled out, in many relationships, and I will tell you, I've performed almost like a paid performer to just always be on, so that nobody knew my dirty little secret that I was just, nothing. That's how I felt about it at the time. At the time, can I just underscore that? But, not that my whole life was that, but it was primarily based on that. And when anything good happened to me, I just want you to hear this for a minute, right? When anything good happened to me, I always just brushed it off as I got lucky. Not that it had anything to do with any talent that I might have or any capabilities or that I was the right person for it. Oh, I just got lucky. I remember when I auditioned for a radio show in Southern California. I was living in North Carolina and auditioned for a radio show in Southern California and got it there were a few applicants, y'all, hundreds. And I got the show. I got it. I got lucky is how I looked at it. I was in my 40s, just saying. I thought about that too, as, when we got the New York Times best-selling book, and I said, oh, it's all Marla. It's not me. I gave it all to Marla. It's because of Marla, not me. I never, ever really accepted myself that I might have had something to do with it. I might have been a contributor to my success. It was just that I got lucky because I had this inability to not see past all this stuff and because I never understood that my life was based on living this shame-filled life. I'm dead serious about it. I'm dead serious about it. So looking back, I started to things started to change as I look back on my younger years, as I look back and on everything that I did and how things started to change. I recognize now that what happened, all these things that happened, was just a setup for me for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, so that I would be called for such a time as this to really live out my mission and my purpose. And I learned along the way, and I have, infinite patience, I feel like, with people like me who have struggled with this stuff, simply because I understand it is something that is so ingrained and so part of the equation that, you know, we get paralyzed by it. So, and you understand this, and for a lot of this, I don't understand a lot of how and why that shame was so cultivated in my life. I don't. And I, maybe if I got somebody hypnotized me and I went back, I could relive it and figure it all out. But I don't think the why is as important as the what happened, is as this is how it was. That was how I looked at it. And I do believe, by the way, that shame is a perspective, you know, it's a perspective. It's how we see the world. And my lens was shame filled. That's how I saw everything, and hoping against hope that I would be approved of all along the way. And it's fun. It's funny because one of the things that happens when you are shame filled, by the way, is that you will get little, reticular activating system. Things will come and you'll get a chance to expand, maybe. Expansive courage is one of the words that I have written that came to me in meditation that I write over and over again in my journal. But expansive courage was not on the list at the time, and I was just paralyzed really by it. But I knew something was off, and I knew, and it was into my 50s, that it was time to let it go. Attached to the shame was a lot of abandonment issues. Attached to the shame was a lot of, am I good enough? Am I enough? Can I do this? A lot of garbage that I really had to mine through. But when I say too, please understand, when I made a decision, I'm not just saying, oh yeah, that's it, take the Band-Aid off, rip, and it was a done deal. I will just say that I recognized that that shame was really only a perspective, and it is not the truth of who I was, because it doesn't line up with my belief, my deep, deep belief that I've been called by God for purpose and by purpose, on purpose and for purpose. If I'm called on purpose by God himself, then how does the shame stuff fit in? Because that's not from him, that's not from him. So, and I will say that it's a process, and it's still a process, because every once in a while something shame-filled does rise up, and here I go, here's how it works. But I'm going to run through, there's 3 things that have helped me. I'm going to run through those in a minute. But first of all, I really think that I need to say a couple of things. And one is that shame is a perspective. I want you to write that down and just think about that and think on that one and meditate on that a little bit and say, how is my perspective colored by shame? How is it colored by shame? And what does that look like in my life? And is this something that truly is just a perspective and it's not the truth? That's a good thing to ask yourself, because I believe that it can't be the truth. Not if you've been called, not if you're here, fearfully and wonderfully made. That doesn't all line up, does it? It's just completely out of bounds. So it's our sense of self that somehow or another we have picked this up along the way. We picked this up along the way. How? Well, maybe starting as a child. Sure. Lots of childhood trauma. Anyone trauma-less? Anyone? Now we read horrific stories. I read another awful story. I don't know why I read these things, but I read an awful story about a little kid who was, living for 2 years under a stairwell. Why are people so horrible? I don't understand that. But you might want to say that that kid's got a sense of, he's got a lot of trauma he's going to have to work out. Now that he's been rescued, a lot of trauma that he's going to have to work out. I also believe that, in our childhoods, I believe that broken people, mainly our parents, with their brokenness, that's all they know. And they pass that to us. And that sense of shame, we teach it, you know? And I wonder how much shame have I passed to my kids without knowing? Um, but I really believe that there's a lot of it there. I believe that some religions are really good at the shame thing. There's a lot of guilt. You'll hear people like making jokes, haha, Catholic guilt or whatever. But hello, there's shame. There's shame there. There's a lot of shaming in religion, a lot of shaming. We started in the garden, when when Eve realized she was naked and she was ashamed. So there's a lot of shame stuff that has come via religion into our lives that you can choose to take on if you want to or not. So I had to deal with some of that. Also, bullying. Bullying puts a sense of shame in there because the bully is picking on someone. And why are they picking on you? Why are they saying you are the one that deserves to be picked on? You are the one that deserves to be taken down. You're the one that we're going to slam against the lockers in the locker room and threaten. You're the one that we're going to attack on the way home, from the bus stop and rip up your, legs pantyhose, my coffee colored legs pantyhose that I saved up for, right? You're the one. But here's the deal. Researchers have linked shame to so much depression and different kinds of depression. There's 108 studies involving over 22,000 people, and it's confirmed that with a lot of shame comes a lot of depression. The two go hand in hand. Well, duh, right? But at least they did this. The other thing that they found too is that oftentimes guilt and shame are very much linked. But the interesting thing is, and this to me is the freedom grabber here, with guilt is often connected with an action that's been done. You did something, and then shame is just that how the lens with which you see yourself. So a good example of this, let me give you an example. Let's say you go to work, you're getting into work late. You just couldn't get your act together in the morning or whatever. It's kind of maybe a usual thing. Couldn't get your act together. You come sliding in. Everybody's waiting because they're trying to get a meeting started. And you're the guy, 5, 10, 20 minutes late, whatever. And the guilt will say, oh man, I feel so bad. I made all my coworkers wait on me and everything. I've really got to get my act together in the morning. I got to do better with this because this is what guilt does. It's based on this action that just happened. Whereas shame will say, I'm such a loser. Why can't I get my act together? I'm a piece of dirt. You see the difference? That's what shame does. Shame assigns not just the blame, but it assigns something to you that you're not. It says that you're terrible. It says that you're awful. It says that you have no worth. Whereas guilt is looking at something that maybe you did. There's a big, big difference. So, we have ways to deal with guilt more than we have ways to deal with shame. Anybody ever do confession at church? I'll tell you, I loved confession. I did. It was free therapy. I did not grow up Catholic, by the way. I grew up nothing, but I became an Episcopalian and was baptized and confirmed in the Episcopal Church back in the 80s. So shame has staying power, by the way. It's got staying power. Anyone here know that shame has staying power? I mean, it does. Our childhood shame just keeps coming in unless we've decided that it's time for it to stop this whole thing and to start questioning everything, including all those negative self-talk things. And so, there's something that we can do to handle guilt, right? We can make reparations. We can apologize. We can try to make it up to that person for being late. Hey, I'm sorry I was late. Can I take you out to lunch today or something? But shame, You can't do anything with you are a loser unless you decide to lose the shame so that you stop saying I am a loser. Does that make sense? But that is like, that's a big deal. Because shame just is a taker over. It's a cancer and it spreads into other things. It says you're not good enough. It says you're not, just the fact that you're here is just, it's not a good enough reason. And I say that because you're here, that is the reason, and that your purpose is just ready to bubble up, and that because you are fearfully and wonderfully made, that is enough. And that's the plumb line to hold on to. No, all that shame stuff, no. We're going to go back to the place of being fearfully and wonderfully made. So how do we let go of it? Well, there are 3 things based on the research. And I didn't get into any of the Brene Brown stuff before because I've talked about it before. And this is all based, I think I got this from Scientific American. This is all based on research, is what they found to help, a person lose this notion of shame. You ready? The first one is 3 R's. It's release, replace, and repeat. Okay. First of all, to release shame, we need to be aware. We need to divide it all up. Like, okay, so what's underneath all of this? The why matrix is super helpful for this, by the way. Why am I feeling like this? What is it? Why can't I maybe get beyond this? What is up? What's here? And having the guts to dig through it a little bit. This is why I am a big believer in making sure that you meditate every single day and that you journal every single day, because that's how we untangle this mess. Shame is tangled up with guilt. It's tangled up with a lot of other stuff, a lot of negativity, depression, and it's just big old dark hole jumbled mess. So we have to look at this, because a lot of times the negative self-talk that we have, especially the stuff that says, I am a loser, I am this, or I am that, a lot of times that stuff is really shame-based. The negative self-talk is, a lot of it is shame-based. And I say no to that, and that is, it's like, it's a tipping point. We all have tipping points when we just say, you know what, that's enough. And for me, getting rid of my mess at home, when I decided it was time to get rid of it, I just started with one thing. I just started with making my bed every day. I'd heard from the military, this is the thing that I just start with one thing and then move to the next and then move to the next. But this is the same deal. Unless we have the awareness that we can do something and that we have the ability to do something, we don't do anything. When the negative self-talk comes in, we just kind of like, oh, well, whatever. It's just, and that's true. And here I have all this evidence to support that. And releasing it, though, means that we have to make this decision that we are done with it and do something about it. Being aware is doing something about it. And then as we do something about it, then number 2 is we replace it. I am such a loser becomes, that didn't work out too well. I need to do better with X, Y, and Z. You see the difference? Showing up, repeat, chronically late all the time is a really, really bad habit. Shouldn't be shame-filled. It doesn't mean that you're a loser and that you just can't do anything or this, that, or the other thing. It means that you need to draw back, become aware, do an analysis of how to fix it and what needs to happen with it, and then fix that thing. And at the same time, as you're fixing that thing, telling yourself, everyone makes mistakes, and I'm fixing this. And start there. Replace it with a constructive thought. So and I want you to realize this too, as we, we have this flood of shame for whatever reasons, that we all have our shame garbage. Shame is a lie. It is not the truth of who you are. It is a perspective that we've picked up and gathered along the way for whatever reasons. I told you a little bit of my story just to put it into perspective of how it was that I picked up shame and how I allowed shame basically to be my operating system for years until I finally got to the place of being aware that this is not going to be, I'm not going to have a good life if I allow this run the show, you know? So I released it, and made the release was the decision. I'm not going to do this anymore. What I'm going to do is figure things out as I go. What I'm going to do is do better with certain things that I can, and I'm going to let go of other things that I can't control. That's all I can do. And recognizing too, in the bigger picture, that I'm here on purpose and for purpose, fearfully and wonderfully made. And that needs to be said on repeat again and again. Because if that is believed, then the shame stuff can't fit into that equation, can it? No place for it. So the replace part is the secret sauce then to getting rid of shame. And again, we're not just ripping off a Band-Aid here. We're doing some major surgery, so it's going to take a while. And if we're patient and kind and loving to ourselves and understanding of that, we recognize that every once in a while, like a prairie dog, that little head's going to come up and say, you know, you're stupid. I'm stupid. Remember, I told you that story just, from a few weeks ago of when I had the pen in the pocket and it made my bath mats Dalmatians. My white bath mats turned into black 101 Dalmatians. And I said, oh, Leanne, you're so stupid. I said that out loud. I repeat that not because I'm super proud of that moment, because those things raise up every once in a while. We don't completely eradicate something. We become aware, we replace, and we hope that we mostly eradicate things. And that, my friends, is living excellently, not perfectly. Perfect doesn't exist this side of glory. Amen. So we replace it with I'm enough. I'm here on purpose and for purpose. I am enough. And your enoughness needs to be able to fill up the places of where you feel inadequate. Because enough is enough, right? Literally of that stuff. But it's also enough to help to grow the things inside that you want. It is. I promise you it is. And then number 3 is to repeat this whole process, because there is no simple, magical, get rid of this stuff. I wish. But listen, hear me for this though. When we do something and say, oh, that was stupid, it's a short hop from that was stupid to I am stupid. So watch your words. Your words are weighty. They mean something. Every single word means something, every single word. The good book says that we're going to be judged by the words we speak, right? So what about the words we're speaking about ourselves? Are we going to be judged on those? And not that I'm trying to add guilt or anything to your equation. I certainly am not. I'm just merely trying to say that every single word that we speak does carry weight. Every single one that we do. And same with the thoughts that we think. So being the person who controls them and doesn't just allow them to do whatever it is that they want, this is the way that we get to the place of understanding and peace. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for, is just peace within. We don't want to be struggling with all this stuff that we struggle with on the inside. We just need to be a little bit more analytical, I believe, and a whole lot less emotional about some things. Not that there's not a thing wrong with emotion. Emotion's a beautiful thing. And when it's directed in the right fashion, it's great. But if we get wrapped up in this emotional heaviness of shame and depression and guilt and finger pointing and bitterness and anger and all the other garbage that comes with it, we're never going to live a life of vibrancy. It's the complete opposite. So let's stop reinforcing this shame and instead start practicing these 3 R's so that we can truly let go of the shame that maybe has held us captive for years and years and years. I know for me that decision that day, I mean, I can almost remember there was a palpable switch in the way I felt about myself. I decided no more. Enough is enough. What about you? You can make that decision today too? I sure hope so. I sure hope so. You are loved. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You are enough. And you're here on purpose and for purpose. And I'm so grateful for that. Peace be with you. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me today. You can find me on TikTok for daily tips to help support your most vibrant life. And remember, you are the author of your own story. Until next time.